Hi everybody and welcome to this pre-mortem talk about The Wandering Village. My name is Philomena Schwab and I'm the co-founder of Stray Fawn Studio, which is a 10-people team based in Zurich, Switzerland. We made a couple games already. Our very first one was called the Niche Genetic Survival Game. Then we made Nimbautus the Space Drone Constructor, and pretty recently, and still working on it, The Wandering Village. Our studio has been around for almost 8 years now, and it was founded back in 2016 by me and my business partner, Micha. I'm telling you all this because it has a little bit of context to what we're going to go through in the post-mortem, or in the pre-mortem actually. So I wrote my master thesis about community building for indie game developers and call it the triple E approach to community building: evaluate, establish, and engage. So our studio has been very much living by this whole approach from the very beginning. With our very first game, we went to all of these kinds of conferences, showed the game there across Europe and then also to America, thanks to some programs that we applied for, because back then we really had no money. It was just a hobby project and we were really trying to find some people that were interested in our games. So we always brought these little paper newsletter things where you could write your name in, and then I spent hours and hours trying to actually read what you have written, which was sometimes just purely impossible. But so slowly over time we built up a little bit of a following there. Then we tried back in the day to squish them all into a Facebook group, because that was the place where things were happening back then. Nowadays this is more likely a Discord. And then we also had a forum where people could post all kinds of suggestions, what they wanted to see added to the game. We had various social platforms, or we are still having various social platforms where we're trying to advertise our games and then slowly draw them in closer to the whole community group, with joining the newsletter and then maybe even funding a Kickstarter or whatever, supporting us in some way. And we've been doing Kickstarter also from the very beginning for every project that we released so far. So that all of that is an integral part of our development approach. And we really just, even with the first game, very quickly, we started seeing the benefits of this, just launching into early access without many people knowing and talking about the game. And then you can see here back for our very first game, the difference that it made, that people actually helped us to push when it was time for the full launch. So that was an early learning we had, and we basically based a lot of our development based on this. And we came up with this whole approach on how we want to make our games, which is essentially we have an idea, and then our whole team needs to be convinced by this idea. That's already quite hard if you're getting a bit bigger or with team size. Already with 10 people, it's kind of hard to find an idea where everybody's yes, I think that will absolutely be a cool game. And everybody's also motivated to work on it. Then we also do super early tests on social media to see if the things work that we want to do. Then, as I said before, usually go into a Kickstarter to validate that this is something that not only can go viral on socials, but this is actually something that people want to have, want to be seen, that it's made, and also are willing to fund you in order to get there. Then we have always, and still also with The Wandering Village, done early access. And then during early access or at the full launch together, usually, or even after the full launch, porting it to other platforms and so on. So our studio is very much focused on PC. And I call this whole little cycle that we do the validate, hype, release cycle. So it's essentially you have an idea, you try to validate it. If you think it has potential, then you try to hype it up. At some point, you launch it, and then you hopefully make enough money with the game that it will enable you to keep spending time with the cycle and make more and more games. So since this is also important, I also wanted to split up the development a little bit for The Wandering Village pre-mortem into these different sections. So of course, the first step is always to validate. So for those of you who have not yet seen our game, The Wandering Village, I thought it would maybe make sense to just add a quick trailer and pitch the game real quick. So essentially, The Wandering Village is a city building game. So you have your little city, your little people, building up an economy. But it has a big twist, and that is that you're actually doing all of these things on the back of this giant wandering creature as it goes through this procedurally generated world, through all kinds of different biomes and so on. And so it's a bit of a mix of a chill city builder where you have decorations and so on, and your little economy and you plan stuff, but also you have like more advanced gameplay features like tech trees and so on. So it has a really broad target audience. I'm going to come to that also in a little bit. So here you can see we have this cute stuff, but we have difficulty modifiers, and it also has some survival game aspects. So this has really challenged us in order to make a game that is appealing to such a broad target audience. Not always sure if it was the best decision to do it like that, but that's what we decided to go for. But let's start at the very beginning. So this is how it started. After we had the idea, it was actually me and my business partner Micha that you saw before walking through an exhibition. And then there was a concept art on the wall of a city. I think it was a turtle with a city on its back, as you often see in all kinds of mythological painting stories and so on, right? And also in more pop culture things like One Piece that picked it up from there. And we both stopped in front of this picture and basically said at the same time, oh, I've been thinking about making a game like that. And that had never happened up until this point. So we brought the idea home, back to our team, and suggested it to them. Hey, how about a city builder on the back of a giant wandering creature? And our artists were absolutely on board with it and basically started doodling right away. I'm going to show you the design process in a bit. And we really quickly realized this is a very ambitious big project, the biggest one that we have done so far. And our studio is completely self-funded. So basically we started grassroots with the first game, just working in our free time. And then as it started earning money, slowly turning this into our day job. And then with the second game too. And with the third game, we wanted to go down the same route. So we knew that if we were doing this, we had to self-fund it. We had some money from our two previous games, but yeah, we thought it was probably going to be hard. So we wanted to be sure that this is actually something that people would care about if we made it. Because if we made it without doing this validation step and then it would flop, that would mean the end of our studio at this point, because we could at the time not afford any kind of flop of this size. So we just went ahead, started making some doodles and just shared them on our own social media platforms. So here you see back in the day on my Facebook account, and we basically just asked people, yeah, what if this game was happening, like what would you call it? And we saw that, okay, it's just a small post and it had like 100 suggestions on what the game should be called. And for me, back in the day, that was way more reaction than I ever got, like for a thing like that compared to our previous two games. So that made me hopeful. So we kept going with the idea and just made some very early doodles, 3D mockups, and then participated in pitch a game with it. And this little mockup got like 6,000 likes, just the pitch and this one little mockup. And for me back at the time, this was by far the biggest tweet I had ever done. So we were convinced that there might be something here that we can work with. So to give you a little bit of now I talked a lot of marketing and stuff, but I also want to show you, this is a video we made back in the day to show like the design process behind things. So I wanted to give you a little bit of insight of how it went down. So at the beginning, we really had no idea what kind of creature we should do. As I said, the original idea was a turtle, but we really experimented with all of these different shapes. And then we were like, okay, the back probably should be flat. It would just make our life so much easier if the back was just flat. And at the beginning, the creature was actually made of flesh and it had fur and everything. And since you were like planting stuff on its back, people found it a bit gross. So we were like, okay, we can make the creature an earth creature, I guess, so that it's not so gross when you like dig open its skin and put your little plants in there. And this is how we ended up with this design for Onbu. And this was the very first 3D model that we did, which we then used to in pitch your game. This is a bit of the game design insights that we did early on, like just super early from my sketchbook, how it could work, what the creature, this is also some early sketches on how it would work exactly. Some things actually stayed in there, some things are completely different at this point. You're gonna see that also with the game design. We were struggling quite a bit more than I think with the visual side of the project. So don't need to go into detail, super into detail with all of this stuff. Actually, what I want to show you the most, let's look a little bit at the environmental design, just because I think it's nice to see just how much the game changed. So it used to have this very different color palette, and we used to think about it also more. We couldn't really decide if it was a base builder or it was a city builder. So like at the beginning also, you were more building separate little blocks instead of buildings. And then at some point we were like, no, this is too much micromanagement for this game. So we said, no, you actually are building the buildings and not like every door and every window and so on. And then this is essentially how we then ended up with these kind of assets. The art style is also a very fun story, because originally, you will also see it a bit in the character design, originally this was planned to be a 3D game, full 3D game. As you saw, the big creature that is walking is actually 3D, but then our animator, who is also here doing the character design, he really, really loves Studio Ghibli, and he really, really, really wanted to have 2D animated little people walking around, so you could spend, I don't know why, but he wanted to spend all his days doing this, doing 1,000 little animations. And we were essentially like, yeah, but maybe it's not the best idea to do it like that. Here you see like a very early graphic prototype thing, where you can see this kind of special art style that he came up with in action. So the animal is actually 3D. You also saw it before in the trailer. The animal is 3D, but then the little people are 2D, and then the buildings are kind of this 2.5D thing, where when you tilt the camera, they move a bit so that it glues the two styles together. And so this was an early visual prototype, still in the whole setting of everything is more blue and purple. And our art team was working on this mostly independently. So they tried out animations, they tried out how it would work with the layering, how the camera would feel when you zoom out, and so on. And this was entirely devoid of any gameplay. So it was really just a visual prototype where you could move around and maybe click on a few things to see like how it looks with the UI and so on. And at the same time, here we are. At the same time, the gameplay team was doing this. So like super basic, how does it work? How does a city builder even work? So our team has never made a city builder before. And I think at this point, it's kind of funny because none of the games we have ever made are actually in the same genre. So I guess we're kind of used to trying to come up with like solutions on an entirely new genre that we never worked in. So we just analyzed like 20 other city builders. How exactly do they work with, like, how do the resources work? How is it working with the worker control? This is a little prototype I made back in the day. Also, like, just, yeah, what should we focus on? How do the controls need to work to be intuitive? So while we were doing these little prototypes, we were playing a ton of city builders and just analyzed everything. Okay, what's usually the motivation in the first hour? And so that kind of stuff is super important, right? Because you're trying to appeal to city builder players. So you kind of want them to feel right at home when they come into your game. But at the same time, you also want to, especially with a game like this, that because of its cute art style also appeals to a more casual audience. You want to make sure they also understand what is happening without having ever played a city builder. This was a first super early test, just to see if we can merge the gameplay. And here you see the bird workers. They're actually still going to be added to the game later on. This was like a first try to see if we can bring it together. But really, for most of the time, and especially for this trailer that we then made for our Kickstarter campaign, at this point, it's all made in Unity and so on. And it looks like a game, but it's really just visuals being placed and like animations being set that are played. Because at the time, we were nowhere close to having the game actually play and look like this. But we were also like, okay, we really need to get some funding in for the game. So we decided to really focus on making the trailer visuals. And it's funny that it actually came out so close to how it's now in the game. I'm gonna just show you quickly what it looked like back in the day already, like with the spores setting in and the new little people need to come and so on. Even the ground shader turned out very similar in the game in the end. I have no idea if that's a coincidence or if we just nailed it. But yeah, this was basically the target that we set for ourselves, what the game should be like, while the game looked like this. And it was a little bit scary because we felt like we're already promising something already quite fancy when we were like far from actually being there. But yeah, I think it really helped to go through all of these prototyping phases. I think in the end we made like 5 different gameplay prototypes. One of my favorites was one that was essentially just UI that simulated the whole world, and you could just interact by clicking buttons like, okay, you build a building, you build that building, and then by doing that, it influenced the overall state of the game, like how your creature was doing, how much food you're producing, and you already got a pretty good feeling for the whole pacing also of the game, like how often should you get resources, how often are you placing new buildings, what are the interesting decisions. Of course, there were quite a few more decisions and interesting parts added as the spatial aspect came in, because then it suddenly makes a difference where you're putting all of your buildings and like that the paths between are as short as possible. Right now, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but right now we're actually experimenting more with blocking off more of the space on the creature's back, because you could, in the game as it is now live on Steam, you can just freely go ahead and place your stuff everywhere, and this results in very similar like structures of the villages. And here, back in the prototype phase, I think we did a better job at actually, like, as you can see here, locking some space off, having this procedurally made, so that when people are sharing their cities, they are like more organically grown, instead of just from the beginning you set all the blueprints to where you actually wanted them to be in the game. So the Kickstarter went very well. So it was just, as I said, this little gameplay trailer that we had. It was just art. And it ended up raising almost $200,000, which for us at the time was more than our 2 previous games had raised combined. So if you're like super interested in how exactly we run our Kickstarter campaigns, we have this little thing that is strayfawnstudio.com/insights, where we sometimes post articles about all kinds of things we did. There's also one about how we got a previous Kickstarter funded with a demo push on like back in the day Imager and 9gag, which is still around, but just constantly posting there about the demo. So if you're interested in like this detailed nitty-gritty, how much ad budget did we spend, how many followers did we have before we started the campaign, then I really recommend you go check that out. And so together with the Kickstarter, I think, how long ago was that at this point? Almost just about 3 years ago now, even a bit longer, 3.5 years ago. At the same time as the Kickstarter, we also launched our Steam page and the first trailer that I just showed you. It was basically just our first official game reveal that we did for the game. So now, with the Kickstarter funded, I would say we completed the validate step, because this would actually allow us to work on the game for quite a bit, not quite up until the early access launch, because being a game studio in Switzerland is incredibly expensive. But it would get us a bit ahead, and it looked like, at this point, it looked like, yeah. So what we basically showed in the trailer, we could deliver. Maybe we could not expand the game a ton further if it didn't do very well, but we could deliver what we promised. And the posts on social media were also continuing to go quite well. So we were like, okay, validation completed. Let's get into the hype phase. And for that, I'm going to show you, it's already a little bit older data because it was from back in 2020 up to 2022. So I still want to guide you, because I think most of these things are still absolutely legit today. The timings maybe have changed on some of the things, but other than that, the strategy is still very, very viable. And we're actually also applying a very similar strategy to this one for our new game, which is called Dungeon Crawler. I haven't it included in this presentation. but it's also in TactiCon, so you can check it out, which is a claw machine roguelike game, claw machine roguelike deck builder. And we used a very similar approach. And within just 4 months, it managed to get up to 150,000 wishlists. And The Wandering Village, in the end, it was up on Steam about 2 years before it came out and managed to climb up to 500,000 wishlists. So let me show you a little bit the different steps and things that we did. So as I said, in the very beginning, we had the store page at launch together with the Kickstarter, together with basically our game reveal with the new trailer, which went quite well. We also had a viral imager post. Back in the day, we had so many viral imager posts and they really contributed a lot. Nowadays, imagers not so good anymore, unfortunately, for game marketing. These were the golden old days. Then it was a little bit quiet for a while, and then we were super lucky that Steam did a city builder sale, and we managed to snag, for some reason, the algorithm liked us and put us quite high up in the upcoming list. This is also, it worked a little bit different back in the day for Steam events. Nowadays, it's kind of hard for an upcoming game that doesn't have 100,000 plus wishlists already to get a lot of visibility in these. Might change again in the future, but back in the day here, you had better visibility for upcoming games, even if they didn't have a ton of wishlists yet. And then we had another viral imager post, of course. And then there was coverage from GameStar, which picked up the game, or picked up the announcement of the game. The Kickstarter was still going on, and then it also made its way to the Reddit front page. So in this early first 2 months, it is, I think, the game managed to climb up to 50,000 wishlists. Here you see some of the posts examples that we did. So Reddit really was very strong for us too. It's very difficult to do proper marketing on Reddit because if you want to hit the bigger subreddits like our gaming and our PC Master Race, you actually need to be a Reddit user, having your profile, commenting on their subreddit, because they don't really want you to just come, drop your stuff and run. So if you want to go hardcore into Reddit marketing, then you really just need to become a Reddit user and use it regularly. There's also the strategy to go into smaller subreddits. Usually they don't care so much if you post about your game here and there, and they'll leave you to it. They don't have much of a problem with it. We also had some viral 9gag posts, which sometimes can get a bit stressful because the comment section is sometimes a bit unhinged, as I would say. So you need to think if you want to take your nerves there. And then, as I said, Imager was also really good back in the day. So here we get into the main chunk, which is, how much is that? Almost, so like 1.5 years or so of being on Steam. And you can see that here there's a lot of showcases, some press, and a lot of like events. Also some viral TikToks, which were also, this is when TikTok was like becoming more popular. It was more popular before. We were a bit late to the party, but this is when we finally started to hop on the TikTok train, back when it was still running. Nowadays, not that much hype on the TikTok train anymore as it was back then, but still our strongest platform. So here you see some examples for digital events. So we just participated in a bunch of them. I mentioned the City Builder sale before. Some of these are also showcases, such as Day of the Devs, which featured us. Almost all of the big showcases, and I think not a lot of people know this, have actually free slots where you can apply for. When you see these numbers, what it actually costs to be like in Summer Game Fest or in the Gamescom Award, in the Gamescom opening night live and so on, you're like, ugh, what? It's like 100K to be in there with a 60 seconds trailer. But usually all of these events also have editorial slots. So you should actually always try and pitch them. Like when you have a new game that you want to announce, if you have a launch date, or if you have the game coming out during their show, you can go ahead and try. Chances are not always very high, but yeah, you can't lose anything, right? Then we also organized a few of our own events. So for example, the Swiss game sale, which was one of the first country-based sales on Steam, which I'm very proud of. We have continued to do this. So TactiCon is also such an event, right? So if your game is participated in TactiCon, job. We are now also the co-organizer of SimFest. Back in the day we weren't when I actually made these slides, but now we have joined them as a co-organizer. So you as a developer, you can find an interesting topic, grab a bunch of games, and then pitch it to Steam that you will do, I don't know, an event about pets, Steam pet event, and then all the games that are featuring pets can be in there. And then your lineup needs to be strong enough so that they actually give you some featuring slot for it, and then it's a very cool thing for everybody. Also here, wholesome games, just as some examples. For the whole showcase thing, so like the wholesome game thing or future game show, PC gaming show, all of these things, they usually require you to make a whole separate trailer for their show. So this is a lot of work. So we spent, I don't know, if you combine all the trailers that we made, months of our work time making trailers. It was super worth it in terms of wish lists, but also cost us a lot of our actual development time. As I mentioned before, TikTok went very well for us back in the day, continuing to go well. Not as much as it used to, but still by far our biggest platform. And then, of course, we had some press people pick it up, luckily, writing about it, even though it wasn't playable yet. So that was very nice, just like picking it up, maybe in a roundup. Oh, coolest games shown in PC Gaming Show, and so on. And also we got the game into some upcoming videos on YouTube. I think those are super cool. So always, like usually in November-ish, we start to reach out to all these people making these compilation videos about coolest upcoming strategy games, coolest upcoming city builders, and send them our trailer and ask them if we could be included in there. And quite a few of them actually included us, which was very nice, and brought in some wish lists. Then also just cross promotions with other devs. So maybe you have some people reach out to you, or you're reaching out to somebody. For example, you have this little space on your Steam page right above the About the Game section that you can basically trade off with other people. And then it's like you put their ad on your Steam page and the other way around, instead of people scrolling down all the way to more like this and then finding just the big games that the algorithm is currently putting on top. You can actually decide what they will see. And if you have overlapping target audience, this can actually be a very nice thing to exchange. We also managed to do this with our own game. So we had a daily deal for our previous game, Nimbatus. And then we asked if we could just have this little landing page where Nimbatus is prominently shown, but then also there's a wishlist button for our upcoming game. And that worked great too. So now that we went through all of these showcases and events and so on, this is the end of the chart, which is including Steam Next Fest, which already back in the day, what was this, 2022, it was super, super nice with Next Fest. It's getting more and more competitive now. It's still very valuable if you manage to get into any of the top positions, but it's hard because at this point, AAA games and everything is participating. 2 years ago, it wasn't so popular yet with big games, so you actually had a higher chance of snagging one of the top spots. Wandering Village actually managed to stay in the top 3 games of Next Fest during the whole Next Fest, which was amazing to us. And it also brought us some interest then from parties interested in working with us. So for Next Fest, we finally had a demo of the game. So after many trials, walking around, throwing everything overboard again with the gameplay, as I said, we were struggling quite a bit to define what the game actually is and how to actually make it interesting for all of these different target groups. But at that point, we felt like, okay, we finally have a demo. It has like different difficulty settings. So that was one of our approaches to solve this whole problem, and that it should also appeal to casual people. We went ahead and basically reached out to a ton of YouTube and Twitch players, and quite a lot of them ended up actually playing the game, which was awesome. Right. So this was the whole wishlist period, and then release came around. And we were actually planning to release quite a bit earlier. So I would say almost a year earlier was our scheduled time. But then, and that is a luxury problem, I guess, the game just had too much hype. And we had a big pressure to get it right because it looked like it could be our most successful game. And also making all these trailers had really cost us a lot of time. So we were like, yeah, maybe it's just better if we move it back as far as we can. Also, we had a lot of attention from Chinese players. And we felt like, oh, at this point, we really have to localize it for the early access release. Usually, we always did our early access releases in English only because it's such a pain to always do localization for every small update that you do. So it's much nicer if you just do it for the 1.0. But we decided, we're probably going to catch a lot of negative reviews if we release it now in English only. So that's also why we decided to get a publisher in Asia, which is Whisper Games, which helped us with localization and marketing in China and in Japan and Korea, and basically in all of Asia. And then for the Next Fest demo that I just previously showed you, we basically just put all the content in there. So like the whole game that we had at this point, we wanted to hear the feedback for it. And we also wanted to have the Next Fest demo a lot of playtime so that YouTubers and streamers would not only just look at it quickly for half an hour, but ideally make a few videos so that we would stay high in the Next Fest charts, which was worth it, I think, because Next Fest alone with the YouTuber push gave us like 100,000 wish lists. But then we had showed pretty much the whole game for free. So we thought like, okay, we should maybe at least take half a year more to add some more content that people hadn't seen at the launch, because otherwise they might feel kind of cheated that they just got the same thing that they played for free, right? Also, we got a ton of feedback out of Next Fest, and we were like, okay, yeah, some of these feedbacks, we actually have to address them. That's why we then decided to keep developing longer. This was very risky for us because like the year earlier release was actually a decision so that we had some funds left, which we could then use to make another pitch or something, or to prepare another small prototype for a Kickstarter, so it wouldn't kill the studio if released the game and nobody cared about it. But we decided to take the plunge also because it had so many wish lists. We thought that it will be fine. Even if it performs on our pessimistic expectations, it should be okay to maybe let us make another prototype. Because at this point, it already had like 350 or 400,000 wish lists. So we thought some of them are going to convert, right? Which is nowadays that I'm seeing quite a few games that actually have a bunch of wish lists and then they just don't convert at all. Back in the day, I was a bit more optimistic, I think. Anyway, we decided to keep working on the game for longer. And we went ahead and just ran an 8-month-long beta testing for the game. So we had Kickstarter backers, right? Those were the first people that were added to the beta. And then we made the beta sign up public during Next Fest, if I remember correctly. So people could like just have a Google form, sign up for it. They actually had to sign up for our newsletter in order to be applicable to get an invitation to the beta. That was really good for our newsletter. Brought in a couple 10,000 new newsletter subscribers, like 15,000, 20,000 newsletter subscribers. It was really cool. And then we went ahead and we had these 6,000 people that were very eager to start beta testing. And so we like split them up into different groups. And like every week or every second week or so, we let in another 200 of them that played the newest version of the game. And we had a super, super in-depth, mega long feedback form, which the guys from Going Medieval gave to us. Thanks if you're watching that. We based our whole feedback based on your structure. And then we basically just had super detailed question about what parts of the game they liked, what they didn't like, what their overall rating is for the game. And at the very beginning, when we started this, the game had like an overall rating of 7 out of 10. And then as we kept iterating, we mostly focused on everybody who gave the game a bad rating, like 4 or lower, and tried to find out like what their issues were, fix them in the next version. And so we kept going up in the rating. And at the end, it was at 9 out of 10 total rating. And this is actually exactly our Steam review score. So now I have very much, maybe it was just a pure coincidence, because beta testers usually, they are very nice and they give you nicer feedback than your average person on Steam that buys the game. But I had also heard, and I had also heard from another game, that they had beta testers and they all loved the game. And there were only a few people that really didn't like it. And then their Steam reviews ended up being really bad, even though the beta was so positive. And then they told me, oh, we should have just listened to the people that were negative in the beta form, because those are already people that are being nicer than usual. And if they gave you such bad feedback, this was actually the feedback that we got the most when we released it on Steam. So that's why we decided to really focus on the negative things and iterated on them. And then finally, after using up all our studio's savings, we were literally, our bank account was literally empty when the date came out. On September 14th, my mom's birthday, 2022, the game came out. And yeah, at this point it was in production for 1.5 years. It was in pre-production for quite a bit longer, like as a side project, while we were finishing up Nimbatus, our second game. And at this point, it cost about $1.5 million to make the game. At this point, since we kept working on it with almost all of the team, it's probably now closer to 2.5 or even 3 million. So it's an expensive game to make. I don't know if I want to make such a big game anytime soon again, which is also why our studio now, like as a little, I told you about the Dungeon Crawler, it's just like a tiny 2-person project. They're going to work on it for 1 year or something, and then it's going to be done. Just so that we don't have to put all our eggs in the basket again, because it was quite a stressful time when all your money is really depending on this one day and how the game is actually perceived. But it worked out. Our team made it. We were super happy. It launched into early access. And during the time we were launching into early access, like in the few weeks leading up to early access, we sent out, so me and my 2 marketing friends from the team sent out over 10,000 emails to press, streamers, and YouTubers. And we had to reply to about 1,000 mails manually within a week. So we were very, very burned out from the whole communication thing. But the result was very good. There was like 500 plus videos on YouTube. During launch week, you can see some of them had quite a few views. I think the biggest one had 1.6 million views on just this one video alone, which was insane. Because of this guy, we actually localized the game to Arabian and to Arabic, and it was very, very hard to do so with the whole UI. So, I mean, it's really cool to have the game in so many languages, but this was really such a pain. I'm not sure we can afford to do this kind of stuff again. I understand now why you see not so many games localized in languages that are actually starting from the other side, because you need to basically mirror your whole UI. Anyway, super worth it. Then with the whole YouTuber push, we also had a huge Twitch push. We did some Twitch integration for the game, which was super cool. It was pretty quick. I think we could have done better. It was very simple. Like you could just tell your dino in which direction, or onbu your dino, in which direction it should go. And like your villagers were named after your chat. So for the 1.0 release, it is still ahead of us at this point. So the game is still in early access. I want to expand on this and make it a bit fancier. And then we worked with Dare Drop, which was also cool, where you give people like little dares that they have to complete when they're making their videos on their live streams. So for example, we had one dare where you needed to sing your onbu, your dinosaur, a good night song. And then you send this video to Dare Drop, they validate that you did it. And then you get like little rewards, like some Steam giveaway keys for your community and so on. So that was very cool. Yeah, it had quite a nice peak. I think peak viewers were like 30,000 at one point on Twitch. And all of this, I have to say, none of this was paid, also for the YouTubers. This was all organic coverage of people that were actually just interested in covering the game. Then again, got luckily quite a bit of press coverage. And then this was, what is this now? 2 years ago? 2 years ago, TactiCon was nice enough to actually include the game in their event. And that was like right after our launch, so it was huge for us to be in this event then. So thank you, TactiCon. You really helped us with the launch. And because of all of this combining, Steam also decided to feature the game in the pop-up section. And so because of all of this, the launch went very, very well. It was basically shown everywhere, all over Steam. And it ended up selling 100,000 copies in the first week, which was quite a bit better than we imagined. So we were very, very relieved at this time that our studio didn't have to close down anytime soon, but we could for sure make another game and we could expand this game more. So we were super happy about that. And then we got a Game Pass deal, which was super cool. So because the game did so well, got so much attention, we then made a deal with Microsoft that it would come to Game Pass in the following summer. So we had about a year's time to actually port the game to Xbox, Xbox One and Xbox Series, made controller support. And the deal was also that this release would be combined with, and here, quickly, just look at this UI. Oh my God, it was, you can imagine. And this is just a part of the UI. There's so much UI in this game. It was very hard to make it play really well on controller. And here again, we took hours and hours looking at other games and how they do it. And they also wanted to combine the launch with a big update. So we made the whole water update. And while this was all super cool, and I would do it again in a heartbeat, it was also a little bit taking the momentum out of our launch because, you know, once the game was out for 2 months and didn't get a major update, people were already starting to write us negative reviews that why is this game not getting any big updates? It was like, okay. I mean, I expected this, but after 2 months, really? And so, but yeah, they were kind of right. So we were so focused on having to do controller support, doing the UI differently. And we also had to hold back some of the content that we made to have a really big content update for the following year in the summer, that the whole development slowed down a little bit. But once it finally made its way onto Game Pass about a year later, we really picked up the pace again, which was really nice. So then we started making some smaller updates. I think so since last summer we made 4 updates. One of it was the first birthday of Onbu, where you could make a little firework show. And then we made a little community contest who makes the cutest fireworks, which was very cute. And then we added trading, did some stuff with the poison, added parasites, changed the whole villager system. Right now, our game designers are turning the game upside down because they feel like, as I mentioned before, the whole building space situation, that you have so much open building space from the beginning, is making your city look samey. Also, like, maybe we're gonna rework how the whole research system is working. So right now we have like a huge experimental thing going on where we have a bunch of people testing. And yeah, aside from a few things that we still wanna add, aside from like one new biome, then in the Kickstarter we promised like that you can have birds and train them. The biggest chunk of content that we are still working on now for the 1.0 release is the story mode, so that you hopefully, don't quote me, so we will have a story mode, and ideally I wanted to have like different options on where you path and different endings depending on your decisions. Hopefully, please. I hope that works out. And yeah, we're currently working on that. So maybe this year, I'm not sure, or maybe early next year or so, hopefully we can show the first version to players. So current state, we sold about 400,000 copies on Steam now, and across all platforms of Xbox and also on the Game Pass. And so over 2 million people have played it, which is incredible to me. I never thought I would make a game that's played by so many people. And at this point, we're still like holding off with discounting the game too much. We're just, as I told you, refining, trying to not make a 9 out of 10 game, but a 10 out of 10 game. I don't know if we can do it, especially since, as I said, the target group is so broad. So when you add something and make the game easier, then maybe the hardcore people are not really liking that. So you kind of have to find the balance, and I don't know if our target audience is too broad to ever be liked 10 out of 10 by all of these people. I already told you, so we're planning right now for the 1.0 release, which is hopefully earlier in the first half or so of next year. And we still have about 900,000 outstanding wish lists. So I'm really hoping we can hit similar numbers to the early access release. Maybe do a DLC, not sure yet, but that would be really cool if we manage to have a good 1.0 release that would then justify making a DLC. And also looking into ports, not 100% guaranteed at this point, but it's looking good. So hopefully we can also release it on a bunch of other consoles, PlayStation, Switch, when it comes into 1.0. So yeah, we were super relieved how it went. We made a little party. Here you can see Onbu's birthday party. We celebrated. We're still celebrating at how nice it's going, and we're really looking forward to being able to continue making games in the next few years. Thank you very much. That was my talk. I hope you got a nice insight. If you have some more detailed questions or anything, just send me a mail or hit me up on Twitter. I'm looking forward to talking to you guys.